Out in the Gobi Desert, there's a plant that spends all day doing something that sounds made up. It takes ordinary air, the same air you're breathing, and chills it until it stops being a gas and becomes a cold liquid you could pour like water. Then it stores that liquid in insulated tanks and waits. When the sun drops and a nearby city switches on its lights, the plant lets the liquid warm up, and the force of it turning back to gas spins a turbine and pushes power onto the grid. You've flipped a light switch your whole life, but almost nobody can tell you where that power waits after dark. Out here, the answer is frozen air. So let me show you what's actually going on because it's simpler than it sounds. Think of it like a battery, except nothing about it looks like a battery. No chemicals, no lithium, no little cells, just air and cold and a tank. Here's the trick. The air around you is mostly nitrogen and oxygen, and if you cool any gas down far enough, it stops acting like a gas and collapses into a liquid. When air turns to liquid, it shrinks by about 700 times. Picture squeezing a beach ball down until it fits inside a marble. All that gas packed into a small puddle of cold liquid you can keep in a steel tank. And that puddle is holding energy because it desperately wants to become a gas again. So the whole plant runs on one very old idea. When power is cheap and there is too much of it, in the middle of a sunny afternoon, you spend it freezing air into liquid. When power is scarce and expensive after dark, you let the liquid thaw. It expands with real violence, and you aim that expansion straight at a turbine. Freeze the electricity when you have too much of it. Thaw it back out when you need it. That's the entire machine. Now here's where it stops being a thought experiment and becomes a real place. The plant sits near Golmud in Qinghai province, and the people who built it call it a super air power bank. It's a national demonstration project, the biggest of its kind anywhere in the world, and the tall insulated tanks holding all that cold liquid are the silent heart of it. On paper, it's rated at 60 megawatts and it can hold 600 megawatt hours of energy. In plain terms, once it's full, it can pour out power for 10 hours straight right through the night. To turn the air liquid, it chills it to around minus 196 degrees Celsius, colder than anywhere on the surface of the Earth has ever been. It was built by a state investment group using technology from the Technical Institute of Physics and Chemistry at the Chinese Academy of Sciences, and crews broke ground back in the summer of 2023. The spot they picked is not an accident. It sits right next to a solar farm rated at 250 megawatts, so all day the panels flood the desert with cheap electricity, and instead of letting the surplus go to waste, the plant swallows it and freezes it into liquid air. Then the sun sets and it hands the power back. Across a full year, it is designed to move roughly enough electricity to run 30,000 homes. And the clever part, the part the engineers are proud of, is that freezing air throws off a lot of waste cold, and boiling it back to gas throws off a lot of waste heat, so the plant catches both and feeds them back in. That recycling is what lifts its efficiency past 55%, when a cruder version of this would throw most of that energy away. So why should you care about a cold tank in a desert you'll probably never see? Because it quietly fixes the one thing that has always been wrong with solar and wind. The sun is generous at noon and useless at 7 in the evening, which is the exact moment everyone gets home and turns on the oven, the lights, and the air conditioning all at once. For decades, the only real answer to that evening gap was to keep a gas plant idling in the background, burning fuel just in case. Batteries help, but a lithium battery farm usually runs dry after 4 to 6 hours, and every one of those cells needs lithium and cobalt and metals dug out of the ground in places somebody else controls. This tank doesn't. it runs on air, steel and cold, with no lithium, no rare metals, and nothing inside it that another country can cut off. You can build it almost anywhere there's room. It shrugs off desert heat and mountain cold, and the hardware is meant to last for decades instead of years. And cheap, steady power after dark is the thing almost everything else quietly rests on. Cleaner air in the cities because less coal burns overnight. Water you can afford to pump and clean. Food you can afford to grow under lights and keep in cold storage. It all comes back to one boring question: whether the power is simply there when someone reaches for the switch. And there's a bigger version of that question too. Power you store yourself from sunlight you caught that same afternoon is power that no one else gets to switch off or ration or price out of your reach. A grid that can carry itself through the night depends on no one for its own lights. But here's the part that should make you sit up. None of this is new. Turning air into a liquid is Victorian science, worked out back in the 1800s. A British company proved you could store grid power this exact way years ago on a smaller scale, and it worked fine. So the obvious question is, if the physics is more than a century old and it plainly works, why is the first plant this size only switching on now in a Chinese desert instead of 40 years ago somewhere else? The answer isn't that it was too hard. If you walk the whole history of this idea, you never actually hit a technical wall. What you hit is a business fact. A tank that stores cheap power is worth the most to the people who buy power and the least to the people who sell it. And for 100 years, the people selling the fuel were the ones deciding what got built. If you make your money burning gas on cold evenings, the last thing you'll pay for is a giant tank that makes those evenings cheap. So the idea just sat there, completely possible and completely unwanted. What changed here is that the people who ordered this plant don't sell you gas at night. They wanted a grid that didn't need it. So they reached back, picked up a 100-year-old idea nobody had bothered to scale, and poured it out across the desert floor. If it quietly makes you angry that a working idea can sit on a shelf for 100 years just because nobody could get rich building it, then you're exactly the kind of person this channel is for. Subscribe, and I'll keep pulling these things down off the shelf and showing you what was possible the whole time. Let me be straight with you about where this actually stands. Right now, the Golmud plant is still being commissioned, tested, and brought online through this year rather than running flat out. Freezing air and thawing it back still loses close to half the energy you put in, which is worse than a good lithium battery. And plants this size can still be counted on one hand. This is a beginning, not a finished revolution. Still, picture it. A tank of liquid air out in the freezing desert dark, breathing a whole city through the night on sunlight it swallowed that afternoon. So here's what I actually want to know from you. If the machine to store clean power cheaply has been sitting in a textbook since the 1800s, who do you think benefited from leaving it there? Tell me in the comments.